mics with on switches. Hello, hello. There we go. Hello, hello. Aha. All right. Much better. Okay. Yay. Well, welcome to day 3, New Music Gathering, day 3. We've got 2 different panels for you, as you can probably already know from having read the program. We have 2 different panels for you. First up, we have James Parker with live coding as anti-capitalist music making. And then we've got the duo of Katie and Ali, Katie Henriksen and Ali Stoughton, doing radio and podcasting in the new music ecosystem. And some Zoom amazing extra people. Yes, indeed. We did not figure this out first. How do we want to approach questions? After each thing or at the end? After each thing. Well, it makes space for like a couple of good pointed questions. And hopefully that is going to go away soon. And let's, without further ado, James Parker, tell us about Marxism.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hi. That thing that I just did there was live coding. If you've never seen it before, that's what it looks like for somebody who's only been doing it for a few months. My name is James Parker. I'm an artist and a musician based out of Austin, Texas. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that thing that I just did and how it is a particularly anti-capitalist way to make music. We're going to talk about what live coding is and about how you can learn more and start doing it yourselves. And we're also going to dive into some of the ideas behind capitalism, how they manifest themselves in our lives, and how live coding presents an alternative way to move forward. Okay, so what is live coding? What in the world was I just doing up there? The words live and coding, I think, both are part of the common vernacular here. Live coding, as you might expect, is the act of writing code in real-time performance setting, usually creating sound or visuals. The language I was just using there is called title cycles, and I like it because it sort of makes sense just by looking at it, right? You see like note names and like hi-hat, kick, snare. It's pretty legible for people who don't know anything about programming. Live coding events are called algo raves, where one or more live coders project their screens behind them while creating sound and visuals for what is traditionally a pretty bumpin' party. This is a picture of Antonio Roberts, who codes under the name Hello Cat Food, no spaces. He uses pure data to create some pretty wild visuals there, and you can see that you can see the pure data patch is like projected behind him. That's the idea of projecting your screen is super important, and we'll come back to it a little bit later in the presentation. And that basically is live coding. There's obviously a lot more to talk about in terms of aesthetics, the community of live coders, the typical structure of an algo rave, education, and of course, anti-capitalism. But in order to talk about anti-capitalism, first we need to talk about capitalism, and we're going to talk about it from what we call in the biz a Marxist perspective, or if you're really in the biz, through a Marxist lens. So Marx was, for basically his entire career, a critic of capitalism. He was one of the first people to see the connections between workers, factory owners, culture, and society. He was doing most of his writing in like 1850, 1860, Industrial Revolution. So these are the kinds of things that he was seeing and noticing. He sees capitalism as a set of relations between different institutions, groups of people, and their work, and spent a large part of his career examining the contradictions inherent in capitalism. It's kind of a common misconception. He actually didn't he was a big critic of capitalism. He didn't really talk about solutions so much. He just pointed out all the problems, which I think is kind of an interesting way to go about it. So it almost goes without saying, but Marx's ideas are very complex, and they are also a lot of them. So we're just going to talk about 3 of them. I realize the slide says 3 basic principles of capitalism. It should say 3 of the basic principles of capitalism. There's like a lot more than this. Well, we're just going to take a quick look at 3 of them: the for-profitism / exploitation of labor, the relations to the means of production, so that's the good one, and alienation, which is not good. Alienation is bad. Okay, so capitalism is a for-profit system. That means that the reasons that people do what they do and make the choices they make are because they're trying to increase profits. That's the ultimate driver of their behavior. Social need, that is, things that people need to be happy and lead fulfilling lives, does not come into play unless there is some direct connection to raising profits. The way that almost all businesses make these profits and how they grow their profits is through the exploitation of labor. The central idea being that you must be paid less than the value that you create. Okay, so pretend that you work in a guitar factory, and your job is to tighten these 4 screws on every guitar that comes down the line, right? The factory makes 10,000 guitars in one day, and you get paid a wage to help make that happen. You create some value by building these guitars. So ideally, you would get paid exactly for that value that you create. But then there's nothing for the capitalists to make, right? So they have to pay you less in order for them to be something for them. They'll argue that it takes money to keep the lights on, to buy the materials and the machines, and all that is true. But they also keep some for themselves. That's how the system works. Oh my gosh! I don't know how to scroll down. Oh, here's my mouse. Great. Okay. This gap, the difference between the value that you create and your wages there is called surplus value. That's a little Marxism-ism there for you. No, that slide's in the wrong order. Okay, so say one day you're back at the guitar factory and your boss comes to you and he says, hey, I found this pill that will make you ambidextrous, which is great because then you can use both your hands to screw in the screws at the same time. You can screw in twice as many screws in a day, and then you can make twice as many guitars, right? And you say, well, I don't want to take a weird pill that makes me ambidextrous. And your boss says, I don't care, because if you don't take it, I will fire you and find somebody who will. So you take the pill because you need a job and you need to feed yourself and your family. And now, as a result, the factory can make 20,000 guitars in a day. Very cool. Your wages should double, right? Wow, this is where we were. This is where we should be. You're able to make twice as many guitars. You're adding twice as much value. Well, usually it doesn't work that way. You get paid the same, and the capitalists keep all the money. And also you grow a tail, probably, from that pill that you took. So the factories, the machines, the pills that make us ambidextrous, the land that we need to grow food, these are all what Marx calls the means of production. The means of production are the things that let us turn labor into goods and services. For Marx, when he was coming up during the Industrial Revolution, factories, farmland, tools, these are like the things that he really focuses on. One of the most important things to know moving forward as a defining feature of capitalism is that the means of production are privately owned. The farmers that grow the food, the workers in the factory, they don't have control, they don't have any ownership stake in the factories or any of the work that they do. They basically just sell their time and their labor to those that they do. And that gets into a thing called the commodification of labor. And I don't have time to talk about that today, but I'm happy to talk about it with anybody who wants to later. Okay, say that you're a luthier, right? You have spent your life learning how to craft beautiful classical guitars. You're creating something beautiful. That's the result of hundreds of years of tradition. You probably are unlikely to sell to like any old person. You want to sell to somebody who is going to treat this item that you've made with the same respect that you do. They're not cheap. It took a long time for you to learn how to make these fine instruments, and you deserve to be paid what they're worth. And you're super proud of your work. You like go into work and you love what you do. These are all things that create meaning in our lives and are very fulfilling. And in this case, you control the means of production. You own the workshop, you own the tools, you own the materials, you get to choose who you sell to. You have control over how you spend your time and how you make your living. But what about if you don't have that? If you don't have control over the mean productions, it results in a thing called alienation, right? How does that affect your life? So okay, you're back at the guitar factory. You're screwing in 4 screws, right? You're certainly not creating something special, right? There's 10 million of these guitars out in the world. They're not particularly high quality. They're mass produced. You don't have any control over who they, I have bolts for this slide. You don't have any control over who they go to. That's your boss's call, right? And they'll likely sell to anybody with $32 and an Amazon account. You feel no connection to your work. You know, if you see one of these guitars in a shop window, you don't walk by and say, wow, I made this guitar. You think, I can't believe I'm looking at a guitar when I'm not at work. I've screwed in so many screws today. You're alienated from the objects that you helped create. You know, you don't feel any connection to this guitar that you see in the shop window. And by extension, you're alienated from your work and from other people in general. You don't have control over the means of production, and you are alienated. It's very sad. Okay, just a quick little recap, right? For profitism, exploitation of labor, you can't be paid. In capitalism, you can't be paid for the value that you create. It's impossible. There's always got to be something for somebody else, right? Relationship to the mean productions, do you have control over your work or not, and how you conduct yourself in that operation? And alienation, do you feel a meaningful connection to your work or not? Okay, so what do we do about it? It's clear that not only are all these contradictions, well, contradictory, but they also don't set the stage well for us to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives. How do we approach transcending capitalism into whatever comes next? There are, broadly speaking, two ways of thinking about fighting these contradictions, or two ways of thinking about anti-capitalism. There's a more socialist route, which is about organizing laborers, unions, taking control of the means of production, and sort of reforming the system as it is. And then there's like a more anarchist approach, which is just creating a system outside of capitalism and sort of having nothing to do with it. Thinking like in the 60s, utopian hippie communes in the woods, right? That's kind of what they were thinking about. When we're talking about live coding, we're sort of looking at the latter. But we're talking about a community that has a way of thinking that's pretty outside the norm and is sort of intentionally places itself as different than other similar spaces. But the issue is that it's not completely separate. Live coders live in what we call an interstitial space. That's this little middle of the Venn diagram here. It's an interstitial space, which means that it has its foot in both camps. It's not a totally separate community. Most live coders participate in capitalism in the same way that others do. They either make their living as artists, like any other artist, or they have other jobs. And for Marx, kind of your work is very important, and how you think about yourself in relation to your work is like the key defining factor of how you move through the world. And so even though for some live coders it's not their day job, they're still participating in this system. Oh yeah, live coding, it's right there in the interstitial space. Okay, so remember how we said that capitalism is inherently a for-profit system, right? A central idea there is that the concept of ownership. I, as the capitalist, own the means of production, and because I own them, you can't own them, and I have more power than you because I own them, and I have more control over how you live your life. Live coding is essentially the opposite of that, which is very cool. This quote comes from a set of community source guidelines from algorave.org. It's a website that sort of collects information about different events going along around the world, and it's like has these guidelines about how to put on an algorave, or like how to think about the algorave, right? It says that no one owns the idea of an algorave. It's not a protected brand or franchise. And later it talks about being wary of institutions, and that the algorave is free culture. Yes. In live coding and in an algorave setting, nothing is bought or sold. All of the events are free, and nothing sellable is ultimately created. There's no product. Even the code written at the end of the event is deleted at the end of the night. The choices that individuals and communities make are therefore not driven by profits, but by the needs of the community themselves. And in a world where cash is king, it's like pretty radical to place social need above all else. And just the fact that these are community-sourced guidelines is very interesting. And the reason that all of this is possible, that no money changes hands and there's no exploitation, is this unique relationship with the means of production of live coding. Excuse me. In our case, they're not owned by the workers or the capitalists. They're kind of owned by nobody. Almost all the environments and languages are open source, which means they're available for free, and community members contribute to their development. And not only are they free, they typically are created as passion projects. Folks aren't getting paid to make these tools for live coding. Coders do this because they want to have fun with coding and make music and art and have a good time with their peers. So we have these languages and environments, right? Those are all free. And at the end of this presentation, I'll give you some resources into how to learn a little bit more and how to start doing it yourself. Some environments use samples. The one I was just using, Title Cycles, is very sample based. It comes with a ton of free samples, and samples are like widely available online, or you can record them yourself. Very cool. Some also use plugins, sort of as a way to make some music. Also widely available for free. The other important barrier for entry here is education, like learning how to live code. One of the many benefits of the live coders sharing their screens, I showed you with the Hello Cat food there, is that would-be live coders can just learn by watching. It's like if when Miles Davis improvised a solo, sheet music of what he was playing just like magically appeared behind him, and you could see what was going on. There are workshops that you can take part in. Usually they're relatively inexpensive. But in my experience, at least, there's so much to learn just by watching people live code and then trying it out yourself. On top of that, folks are super friendly and open to sharing knowledge. There's a Discord server and tons of forums dedicated to live coding where people can ask questions and get answers from experts. The only real barrier for entry is a computer and or an internet connection, which really is required to make any of this happen. That being said, there are a handful of tools that are available for use within the browser, which means that you don't actually have to download anything, which hypothetically means you could host an algorave at a public library using just the shared computers. And I think that would be awesome if we could make that happen. So get on it, New Music Gathering people. Okay, the last point is alienation, which live coding addresses in a few interesting ways. For Marx, controlling the means of production is a key factor to avoiding alienation. So check, we've got that. In live coding, we have control over what we're doing, and we get to choose what we do when we want to do it, and that's amazing. The other way live coding opens up this door is connecting with our work and fellow algoravers is through the sharing of the screens. It's a vital part of the live coding experience, and it comes up in both those algorave.com guidelines and in the TopLap manifesto. TopLap is called the home of live coding. It's a very cool organization. A couple things to note. The T, it's an acronym. It's like the Temporary Organization for the Promotion of Live Algorithmic Practice or something. The T stands for temporary. That's very cool. It's like not, it's been around for 20 years, but it's like, it could go away tomorrow, right? It's like not an institution. There's no endowment. It's like an interesting way to like kick things off, right? It's called, this thing is called the Manifesto Draft. I don't know about you. For me, a manifesto conjures up a lot of images of communism and socialism. And the fact that it's a draft is kind of interesting. It's like saying, hey, this is a living document. It's been a draft for its entire existence, right? It's a living document. We're going to change with the times and with the needs of the community. It's very cool. So two of the guidelines are very interesting. Give us access to the performer's mind. The whole human instrument. Obscurantism is dangerous. Show us your screens. So I skipped through some of my notes. There's lots of emphasis on the sharing your screens. And then there's this bit about, oh no, I'm moving around. Here's another little bit about the sharing screens. It's a little bit less militant. This is from the algorave.com guidelines. You know, most performances should be live coded, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's a really, part of what this goes into is the, this like black box idea that you see in a lot of electronic music. It's like, you know, it's like if you go to a Daft Punk concert, it's like everybody there is having so much fun. The lights are amazing. The set is amazing. You don't really know what's happening up there, right? They could just, I don't think that they do this or did this, but they could just press play, and it could. And did you really? Well, that's not a good look for them, is it? But we don't know, right? We don't really have any idea what's going on up there, right? In live coding, we kind of get rid of that by saying like, hey, look, here's the code. You can see what's happening. And this particular language is nice. Like you can see note names, you can see chord symbols, you know, amplitude is like a common thing, delay. It's like, oh yeah, I know what these words mean, and I can like connect them to what the sound is happening. And because it's totally improvised, you, the audience member, play a role in how it's created. You know, if I'm up here live coding and I'm doing some like weird, crazy kick drum stuff, and y'all are like really not feeling it, I might like switch it up and do some weirdo snare drum stuff and see if that works, right? There's this sort of give and take, and that's sort of kind of what this little this part of the TopLap manifesto says. It's like kind of gibberish actually, if you read it, which I'm going to right now. Performance involves continuums of interaction covering perhaps the scope of controls with respect to the parameter space of the artwork or gestural content, particularly directness of expressive detail. So clear, right? Amazing. Kind of how I interpret this whole bit is that the audience plays a role in how things are going. There's a continuum, there's a cycle that connects how the music is made. The next little part about the traditional haptic rate timing deviations of expressivity in instrumental music, of course, everybody knows all about those. It's basically saying that when we live code, we're not trying to recreate traditional dance music or any kind of music. The fact that we're live coding it has its own language and its own sort of idiomatic way of thinking about things. Why repeat the past is a great question, I think, that we should all think about. Okay, now that you're all ready to overthrow the bourgeoisie through algorithmic dance music, a couple of resources I just want to look at really quickly here. And I don't think I have Wi-Fi out here, but I'm going to... I clicked these links earlier. Sorry, one second. Okay, this is the TopLap website, toplap.org. There's this discussion forum up here. Nodes is like a link to, oh, I can't click anything, I forgot. Nodes is a list of local organizations that have kind of more up to, like, I don't know, maybe there's a St. Paul one, but not. That's not with my password. Oh, okay, great. And this is algorave.com. It's got a huge list of events coming up. Which is very cool. This one, I think, is the best one. It's a GitHub repo, as they call them, hosted by TopLap. It's called Awesome Live Coding. It's got all things live coding. There's the community here. There's a whole list of different languages. So many, too many, really. And then there's the libraries, which are different than the languages, but they're, cousins. Then there's a bunch of videos about live coding, several videos of some talks, some papers, and blog posts and articles written, a couple of conferences, tons of really great resources to get started. Then there's this Title Cycles, is the website I was using. Look at how professional this website looks. Wow. It's super easy to install and get started. It's actually not that easy, but they have very clear instructions about how to do it, which is very fun. And then for those of you who are into visual stuff, there's a very cool browser-based language called Hydra, developed by Olivia Jack. You go to the Hydra, you click that Hydra link in that list on the TopLap list, and it'll take you here. It says Hydra is a platform for live coding visuals in which each connected browser window can be used for a node of a modular thing. Okay, to get started, close this window, change some numbers, type Control-Shift-Enter. Okay, so we're just going to spend 1 minute doing that. Okay, great. So I have these cool floating dots that are moving in and out. I'm going to change this to 2. This is from 200. I'm going to hit Control-Shift. Oh, and now I have these cool bands, right? Okay, color 0.5. Let's try changing to 0.9. Control-Shift. It didn't do anything. That's okay. I'm just going to go change a bunch of these numbers and see what happens, see what I can make. Oh, that's a different color. That's cool. Let's change this to 15. Ooh, that's totally different. That's very cool. You got to be careful with this one if you're photosensitive or have a sort of risk of epilepsy kind of stuff, because it can get a little bit weird, really by accident, if you just go around changing numbers. But it's very fun to explore, and it's that easy to just poke around. And then a lot of these languages are also very well documented, which means there's a website that says what all of these numbers, all of these words mean, and what each number after them means. And that's all I have for you. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Okay, so I'm on the mic now. So excuse me for making
Sure.
up a word here in my question, but I'm wondering how sustainable do you think is the interstitiality of this community. It seems like it's only a matter of time before someone tries to create an Al Gorchestra, or until we get a commercial example from Sony, of this sort of thing. So do you think the community is able to remain, amongst itself?
I do. I'm optimistic. And the reason that I'm optimistic is that in these guidelines, it's like so explicitly laid out, these principles of like, be wary of institutions. There's no headliners, right? It's all about collapsing hierarchies. And so I think that if you create a space with these ideas in mind, and the fact that it's like nobody's really making any money off of it, I'm sure people could find a way. But I am optimistic that these people are like going into this with sort of this anti-consumer, anti-capital mindset. And that they kind of fight to keep it that way. Yes, in the back. Yes, you should.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there have been any major demographic surveys done to look at the gender and racial and all other sorts of metric makeup. Because I know that this is often a problem in anarchist spaces.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so it's the whole community is very informal. I would be shocked if there was some sort of like structured survey that happened. One of the points of actually I have it in the slide, collapsing hierarchies, diverse. So this is one of the guidelines in the algorithm, diversity in lineups and audiences. It says, try to have a diverse lineup thinking about gender, ethnicity, class, age, belief/non-belief, and education. A diverse lineup creates a diverse audience, which leads to a diverse community and is beneficial to all. Additionally, it's also nice to see a nice range of technologies and approaches. So I think, again, I would be shocked if it was like the most evenly split in all of these ways. But I think there's a explicit move towards doing so. The next little bit it says is like if you're going to start an algorithm, try to like do these things from the beginning, because once an event or a series has an image of being like an old boys club, it's like almost impossible to change that, right? And so they're like trying to go about it in this really intentional way, which I think is uncommon for things kind of getting started. I think when we want to start a concert series or something like that, we're just like trying to make things happen, and we're doing it in whatever way I can. I think like stepping back and like saying, hey, diversity needs to be happening here from the get-go is it's kind of neat, I think. Yes, Greg.
I'll do it this way. Do you have some idea about the size of growth? I know that the manifesto is like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Any idea that you can tell us about like how it's grown and how many of these events are happening and kind of where they're located right now?
Yeah, so it's very big in the UK. Is kind of where it was started, and there are communities in major cities, New York, LA, Chicago. And then like some like I think somehow through some of these forums or through these websites, people find each other in strange places. Like I think there's kind of something happening in Omaha. Excuse me, but it's not so like it's like kind of a weird thing, right? And it's takes like a certain kind of person to be really curious about it and like really get into it. So it's not, especially in the U.S. I don't think it's like so widespread, but it's on its way. I'm optimistic. Yeah.
One follow-up.
Yes.
How are people advertising and getting this information out if they're trying to also remain anti-capitalist? That seems like a really big challenge.
Yeah, they do a very bad job. So there are these two websites that have kind of like all the events on them. That's kind of it. Maybe there's some stuff on Facebook. Actually, so I'm from Austin. South by Southwest is a big thing. There was a live coding thing at South by Southwest in 2019, I guess was the last one. That surprised me to see that, because South by Southwest is a very commercial thing, which is like kind of not that cool. But it's sort of, it's a lot of this like word of mouth, like just like, hey friends, we're doing a thing. That's it, you know. Yes, Lainey.
I'm the last question. So first of all, I would just say for that, I've had really good luck on Instagram doing hashtag algorave.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's how I find out about stuff, and it's really well documented, and I really love that. I was curious how you're going to get young people in, because a lot of even like music technology people, you say coding, and they're like, moo.
Yeah.
So like, are there, I don't know, I only know it as sort of the text-based coding, but are there moves to make it more like graphical or through the phone, or like are the young kids doing a cooler version than us?
Yeah, so that guy Antonio Roberts, he does a free workshop called Afro Algo, that's like all about teaching young people of color how to live code and like people getting into it. I'm not sure what like educational movements there are in schools. There is a I wouldn't say institution, but it's not really that. It's a nonprofit called Latinitas in Austin. It's like all about teaching like young Latina girls how to code in general. And I'm like trying to figure out how to get in there. And it's like, let's get some creative coding stuff in here. I think there's some live coding stuff to be done here. But it's a big program, and so they're not so flexible with some of this kind of stuff. But it's a great question. I don't know. I don't have a great answer, unfortunately. Thank you all so much for your time. Lainey said that was the last question. Appreciate it. And let's chat some more.
Check, check, check. Check.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Oh.
So everyone can hear me there in St. Paul. Hey, hi. I'm talking to you guys from Fayetteville, Arkansas. I was hoping to get up to St. Paul in person, but The Delta variant is really bad down in Arkansas, so I decided to be safe and stay down in Arkansas. So thanks so much for being a part of this. I'm really excited today to be a part of this panel on radio and podcasting and the new music ecosystem. We're taking on the theme of money here for this year's conference. Obviously it's on everyone's minds. And I think for radio and podcasting, it's a great way for you as someone in the new music ecosystem to get your music and have these conversations out in the world. So I'm just really thrilled to have all the panelists talk about how it's like a really wide world. And it's like, speaking of like all the algorithmic stuff that we were just talking about with the coding, I think with radio and podcasting, we have this opportunity to escape the algorithm and have this really humanistic touch that we can provide as producers in radio and podcasting. So I'm just really thrilled to talk to you guys about how you guys can best use radio and podcasting to get some exposure, get some, maybe a little money going towards you, and just to kind of help you cultivate that new music community. My name is Katie Henriksen, and I host a podcast called Sound Off, which launched on the Critical Frequency Network last year. And the premise of the podcast is music that challenges the status quo. So hybrid music sounds from people who are challenging a lot of different things. So I had Missy Mazzoli on as a guest. And, she's groundbreaking. She was one of the first women to ever be commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera. And then she started Luna Composition Lab with Ellen Reed to help women, non-binary composers really get a foothold into that system that we all know doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I also had a longtime radio show at an NPR station here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, as a classical music host and music director. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation, and I would love for everyone else to introduce themselves. Doug, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Hopefully I'm not too loud. Katie, a little louder, a little more. How's that? Is that a little better? Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Okay, cool. So hi, first of all, thanks to Katie and Ali for putting this all together. It's an honor to be on a panel with y'all, and Maggie too. So I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer. I'm a composer, I'm a musician, and I also am a professional recording, mixing, and mastering engineer. I've worked in Nashville, and I currently live in Boston, and I'm an associate professor at Northeastern University. I'm also the host of The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. Thanks for having me.
Hello, my name's Maggie Malloy. I am the curator and host of a weekly experimental music radio show based in Seattle called Second Inversion. It airs on Classical King FM, the public classical radio station in Seattle. The show is kind of based around different themes or trends in contemporary music each week. That could be anything ranging from inspiration for music to some of the nuts and bolts of how we create music. So every week the theme is a little bit different. The idea is over a long period of time we can music spectrum.
Okay, and I'm Ali Stoughton. I'm the host and producer and engineer and dog's body for Not Brahms and Liszt, which is a funny pun that Brahms and Liszt in Cockney rhyming slang is short for pissed, which means drunk in British English. But I have a 20th and 21st century radio program, so I don't play either Brahms or Liszt. And so that's how the genesis of the name. This is out of MIT's radio station, which is WMBR 88.1 FM in Cambridge, Greater Boston, Cambridge area. And this is a student and community radio station, so we're maybe unique in that none of us get paid a dime, not even the people that maintain the equipment and installed our new new transmitter and so on. So being at MIT is a good place to be, of course, if you're doing electrical engineering. I've had this program for 6 years now, so come October it'll be 6 years. And I started out by playing a lot of 20th century music that I knew, but in recent years it's gravitated more and more to hot off the press stuff. So I'm guessing maybe 70% of what I'm playing are works that were written in this century. And basically things that come my way that I like, I get on the radio. And just one more metric, and then we'll go into the questions. I did, when I got to show number 250, I'm almost at I think I'm at 280 now. I did a little bit of statistics and realized that I'd played works by 700 different composers in the first 250 shows. So that just speaks to how much new work is being produced. So we're going to go into the questions, and if you're on the YouTube chat, our channel, I think you can type questions in there, and someone will relay them to us. If you're in the audience here, you'll be able to come up to a microphone in a few minutes and ask questions live. But I've got a question just to get us started, which is maybe a couple questions. We'll see. So this is for all the panelists, and I guess we'll go back to Katie to start. If someone wants to pitch their music or themselves as an interview subject to appear on your show or podcast, how can they most effectively make the pitch?
Awesome. And I love that question, because I didn't mention in the intro, because this is radio and podcasting, but I'm also a publicist. So I do a lot of helping with artists to get their music placed on radio shows and in podcasts and all that kind of good stuff. So, I mean, I think the main thing is to first know who you're talking to. I think that's a big thing. I mean, obviously, there's so much noise out there, but you want to connect directly with the producer or the host that you're writing. So know their show, know what they're interested in. Just be a listener, kind of be familiarized with what they like to program. So start there. And then after that, it's about having a compelling story to tell. I mean, everyone has a compelling story to tell. That's how I feel. I feel like, we all have something to say, and we all have a unique perspective, but making sure that you tell that story. And it's just sending out a personalized email, and also a little bit of information about yourself, not just like, hey, here's my music, I hope you play it, a little more than that, a little more context. And I think that's really kind of how you get your foot in the door. You start a conversation and you build those connections with the producers and the hosts, to really cultivate things. I know that Ali and I actually really got to know each other because I was the publicist for New and started Amsterdam, and we just built up a connection and a relationship, and it's really beautiful. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Doug, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, the big thing, I didn't want to become a gatekeeper. And so when, the idea of the Process podcast is to talk in a very intense way about the creative process with the people who are being creative. And I fought a lot with the title about, should it be new music? Should it be contemporary music? Should the word classical be in there? Should it be experimental? And so I decided I just wanted to be open to what was coming in. And, the reason I put the podcast together was to connect with people who are being creative, and also just, bring to light their point of view. Because we were talking, or in the last presentation, there was a mention of a black box. Sort of the creative process can often be sort of a black box, like how do we get to a finished piece? So for people, so in other words, not wanting to gatekeep, I've had people just directly email me. Usually people who contact me on social media, I'll direct them to my email. But a lot of what Katie said, I mean, knowing the show, I had one guest, Anthony D'Onofrio, who just kept messaging me and emailing me about different things on the episodes, just saying like, hey, this was really cool when this happened and this happened. And sure enough, I looked up Anthony's work, and I was like, oh, great. Like, why don't you just come on the show? You have so much to say. So I think it can be really organic, but I think it goes back to what Katie said about like creating some type of relationship beyond just here's a info dump of all my stuff, like play it, just like creating some type of relationship.
Sure, yeah, I definitely agree with everything Katie said. I'm really a proponent of sending fewer emails and making them more thoughtful and focused. I think that, that I actually connected with Katie through email as well when she was at New Amsterdam. And yeah, just feeling like there's a personal touch, like they have heard your show and they have a sense for the type of music that you play. When you're pitching your music to somebody, you're really asking them to invest some time in your work. So it is polite to invest a little bit of time in their work too, and to get to know them, or to get to know their show in a way before you make that pitch. And I think that is the type of thing that builds relationships and builds communities like this one. So that would be my recommendation. Also, I agree it's tricky when people contact you via social media about playing music because, you've got all your work stuff in your work email, and it's easier to keep it organized in one place. Sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming to be contacted from all angles.
So I guess I'll just say that I keep a running email folder of different options that are out there, and so each week I'm thinking, so after my show is on Mondays from 4 to 5:30, and after that I'm working on the next show, and I usually start with some piece that I really, really like, and then I think what harmonizes, so to speak, with that piece. And so if in emails to me, if there are links so I can listen to your music, but also if there's some sort of categorization of it, that, what kind of thing is it, that'll help me when I'm sifting through emails and thinking where do I go, from here? How do I take this initial idea and then flush it out to create a show? Let's do one more at least question, sort of pre-prepared, which is this: what types of music or lengths of pieces or sorts of interviews are you open to featuring on your show? And also, so you can dovetail that if you want with what makes program notes or composers' bios useful to you?
So, I like I said before, I dwell in the hybrid spaces and forms that are combining lots of different things. So I love it when people are not saying, well, I have this very direct, whatever it is. That being said, it's just amazing to have context of what the work is. And I know that can get really tricky when it's a piece of music, because you're using the music to really convey your thoughts and your ideas. But even like one sentence on the piece and that kind of synthesizes a little bit about it can be a huge help, especially because there is so much music out there. And I think all of us as producers have just we're over inundated constantly with new sounds. And if I could, I would like what Ali said, right now I'm not making money with my podcast at all. It's something, it's a passion project. It's something I love to do. I love to really have compelling conversations with people who are making this music, and also feature that music so that I love getting listeners who maybe don't even feel like they belong in the new music crowd at all. They're just like, oh, I want to listen to this, and it's great. That's a little bit of an aside there. But basically, like I said, it's going back to the connection. So if you're sending me a project, I want to know a little bit about it and why it's personally important to you as well. So I don't know, that doesn't necessarily, it's about building connections and relationships. I mean, it really does all go back to that. I don't know if that just seems silly, but it's the truth for me. So Doug, what do you have to say?
I agree. I think bios are tricky. I mean, we could have there could be a panel, there could be a whole conference on what should be in your artist bio. Is it a musician bio? Is it your professional bio? So I'm just going to avoid that question. But I, I think what I'm looking for in guests definitely stems from somebody who's going to be honest, and not because I'm like forcing people to share their process, but I think the process, the episode or the show works when people are just being really honest about not only what they're doing in the creative process, but being honest about things that they worry about. Because I think then the audience connects with that idea of we're creating and creatives are vulnerable and can be, and that's okay.
Can I just jump in and ask you a question, Doug? So each of your shows, it has a single guest, is that right? So I'm not sure that you quite emphasized that. Could you just talk a little bit about your format?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. So each episode is only 22 minutes long. They are highly edited, and there is just one piece of music that we focus on. We first talk about the creator's process just in general. We talk about a specific piece, and then I have something called the creative cogitations, which are questions no one wants to answer. They're they're just like those, like, is being creative a primal urge, or do you have sovereignty over what you create? Like, these are things that keep us up at night. So, but they make great podcast conversation. So thanks for that follow-up, Ellie.
Yeah, I think what Doug said about centering the audience is really important, something that artists sometimes forget when they're pitching their music. It becomes more about like the awards and the commissions and the schooling, and especially for a show like Second Inversion being on a public radio station, all, straight ahead classical music, a lot of the listenership for Second Inversion is people who kind of stumble upon it, who are interested in classical music, interested in art music, maybe open-minded listeners, but don't know a lot about the industry of new music, are not familiar with a lot of the terms and the academics behind it. And so I think of Second Inversion really like a kind of a gateway for new listeners, people who are curious and primed to hear something new, but who maybe don't have like a lot of the background that many of us here do. And so I try to really distill it down to like the most human connections that you can make with people, and to try to distill it down to some of like the things that we could all relate to, or things that shared experiences that, that you could be an expert in. I had read a quote before that the job of the journalist is to educate themselves in public, and I think about that a lot in all of the work that I do, freelance writing, radio hosting. If there's something that I don't know a lot about, then I want to try to find a guest who can share more about that, who has that lived experience, and who can shed some light on it for the rest of us in a way that is engaging and friendly and open and welcomes everybody to be a part of it.
So let me highlight a couple things. One is I have a 90-minute program, and I am very open to playing long pieces. In practical terms, so I go from 4 to 5:30. The first hour at the hour break, pretty close to that, I need to do a station ID, and that means in practical terms that and I also like to start the program with some very, very short piece. So sending me short little pieces, that's actually really, really useful to me, because every week I'm thinking, what's some short little piece that I can play before I do my intro. Something that's longer than maybe 53 minutes is a little bit problematic. I can go over and do the station ID late, but it's a little frowned on. So, but I'm completely happy to play a really long piece if I love it. But if it's something that I'm really enthusiastic about. I almost never play single movements of multi-movement pieces. But occasionally I'll pick like one of 5 art songs as one of these things to go at the very beginning. In fact, that's what I'm doing this coming Monday. Let me just say something about composer bios, that when Stephanie Ann Boyd was speaking, and she described herself as a melodist, and that what kind of content she writes for. I looked up her bio. I'm sure I've seen it before, and the first sentence is just perfect. Michigan-born, Manhattan-based American composer Stephanie Ann Boyd, born 1990. writes melodic music about women's memoirs and the natural world for symphonic and chamber ensembles. And I mean, it's just so wonderful to have it distilled down like that. And a typical bio that I look at is nothing like that, that it takes me 20 minutes to try to figure out a sentence like that. So if you can help us out, I think that makes our lives easier. Maybe it makes it more likely that we get things on the radio. And then in terms of program notes, not surprisingly, lots of technical stuff is probably not going to work with our listeners. What works well is like a story, a hook, something. You know, I wrote this piece because I had this experience and I was trying to convey something about it. That kind of thing will hook the listener in, and that's I think what maybe multiple of us are looking for.
Yeah, something else that we also talked about was pronunciations for your name. It's so helpful if you have that in your materials. Sometimes, we read some names that just have no idea how to say them on the air, spend a ton of time researching, and sometimes can't even find it. So that's really helpful to have a pronunciation guide for your name.
Sure. I mean, if someone has a name that was originally from Italy or French, we don't actually know how you pronounce your name now. Sorry. We don't really know how we should pronounce your name. Is it, if someone's a Canadian composer and they might be French Canadian, well, maybe we spend a bunch of time digging around trying to figure that out and decide whether it's LeMay or, I'd have to think about how I should pronounce it. Do we have any questions on the YouTube chat? Okay. Would anyone? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that we do have a question from Daniel Felsenfeld. He wants to know everyone on the panel's website so that people can check out the programs. My program is podlink.to/sound off, and that'll give you the link to go to all the different places you can check out my podcast.
Doug, do you want to go next?
I'm currently pasting the link into the YouTube chat, so my brain's about to explode because I'm doing 5 things at once. But yeah, you can check it out at dougbielmeyer.com or at the Podbean link I'm about to post on YouTube.
You can find us at secondinversion.org. It's all spelled out, 2 words, secondinversion.org.
And in my case, you can go to wmbr.org and then look for the program Not Brahms and Liszt. You can also Google for Not Brahms and Liszt at this point. That's the easiest way to get to my website. It's Ali Stoughton, no punctuation.us is my homepage, and then there's a radio link. And we should probably lean on the NMG people to put links. So in the program notes for our session, I think there could be hyperlinks probably from our names to our websites, and so maybe we'll push on the M&G people to put those links in. Would people here like to step up to the microphone and ask us a question? I mean, either individually or to the whole panel.
But that's how new music goes.
Thank you. My question is for Katie. Katie, how do you, on the podcast front specifically, how do you balance local stories versus stories that you want more nationally? Do you think about the balance, there? Something I think about a lot is not making my work too local, making sure it applies to more people, specifically on the podcast front. I wonder if you've thought much about that or have anything to say to that.
Hey, Garrett, it's good to talk to you. Awesome. Well, my podcast is basically all focused nationally and internationally. So my focus there is to find compelling people to talk to across forms, and also to highlight people who have been traditionally underrepresented. That's one of my things. Even when I was programming at an NPR station, I was like always looking to program more women, people of color, all the different things. I want to show the diversity that there really is within what we call classical-ish music, and so I really focus on universal stories and storytelling, and so yeah, it's not local at all, to answer your question.
Any other people want to come up and ask questions?
Hello, Philip Blackburn here from Numa Records. Hi, Ali. I know your voice, and other friends here. For those of us who run record labels and throw lots of stuff at your respective walls, some of which we hope stick and some of which doesn't, how willing are you to forgive the ones that you really hate, even though we all think they're equally good? Is there a perfect ratio? I mean, if I send you an email every month of, well, here's what's on offer, are you willing to say, yeah, I'll pass on that one, but next month I'll pay attention to whatever else? Am I going to shoot myself in the foot if I put out the wrong thing and send it to you? Or in addition, should I do that anyway and also maybe send you a personal message saying, I think you're going to particularly like this one?
So I'll go first. So the couple of albums that you pitch every month to me is absolutely perfect, and I'm really happy with the detail that you give about the different pieces, or the different albums. So I know when I'm putting together a show, I know what will fit probably well, and then I drill down and listen to the pieces and decide what to include. It's also been really helpful to me that I don't have to reach out to you and ask for the WAV files, that you're actually sending those links up front, because I'm often running, a few days figuring out what I'm playing in the week before the show. If I have to have an email cycle with people where I say, can you please give me access to a high resolution file, then sometimes that means that things time out. I guess, let me say one more thing, that it's not quite what you asked, but one of the things I try really hard to do every week is promote not just my show, but also the albums that I'm playing and the labels on Twitter. Twitter is what I use. I don't actually do Facebook, and I and let them in and sort of create a buzz. And so in a good week, I think I feel like I'm managing to give something out, to the composers, to the labels, to the performers, and I hope it works, from your end as well.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, everyone.
as noted, if you can send us a list of links you want retroactively put in the program, we can do that for you. Also, I think the links are going to show up in the YouTube comments, and those videos will stay on our site for some time. I don't know exactly how long. Next up, we've got new friends. About new friends. So new friends, for you who don't know, is some time where people can meet each other. In the past, we've done it with